Millionaire invites surprise guest. What happened when the beautiful maid arrived will shock you. As Jeremy Mitchell surveyed the extravagant penthouse filled with glimmering chandeliers and polished marble, he felt the weight of an impending dilemma gnawing at him. Tonight, as self-made millionaire, he would host the gala that defined his success, gathering the elite in the heart of San Francisco. But among the sparkling lights and designer dresses, his mind drifted to an unexpected thought: Maria, the maid from his childhood. Her kindness had cushioned the hard edges of poverty, and now, in the glow of his empire, he felt an urge to bring her back into his life. The very idea stirred memories he had buried deep, memories of struggle, of feeling like an outsider desperate to escape his circumstances. As the clock ticked down to the event's start, Jeremy wrestled with a growing unease. His world was built on wealth, status, and power, yet it felt built on fragile boundaries he feared would shatter with Maria's return. The people filling his penthouse, their glitzy attire reflecting their inflated egos, seemed to belong to another universe entirely. Was this not the world he fought so hard to belong to? Would they accept Maria, a reflection of his past struggles, who had once stood by his family's side? He inhaled deeply, grappling with the palpable tension in his chest. By inviting her, he might just unearth old biases he had thought long buried. His commitment to inclusivity clashed fiercely with the thinking of the elite around him. Did he dare challenge the very essence of his successful facade? Should he risk the judgment of those who decided worth based on wealth and appearance? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As guests mingled and soft laughter filled the air, Jeremy's heart raced, waiting for Maria's arrival. At that moment, he saw her gracefully walk through the door, dressed elegantly but simply, radiating authenticity amidst the fancy surroundings. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Whispers cascaded like ripples through the crowd, skeptical stares darting from face to face. Would she shatter the refined mirage they all clung to? Watching her navigate the sea of judgment, Jeremy felt his face heat from embarrassment and resentment. How could they disregard her brilliance, her contributions, simply because of appearances? The emotions roared within him. Loyalty to Maria battled furiously against the instinct to conform to the expectations of his guests. It was his world versus his past, and he felt cornered, the stakes higher than he had ever anticipated. As Maria began to discuss her groundbreaking mathematical research, the room quieted, and Jeremy's dread escalated. Discomfort enveloped him as he saw the looks of disbelief flashed across the faces of those he once deemed friends. They could not fathom that the maid they barely respected harbored the intellect that could rival their own. He clenched his fists, conflict surging within him. Would he risk his standing to defend her? The quiet remained heavy, his heart thumping, trapped between admiration for Maria's courage and fear of his peers' judgment. In that critical moment, Jeremy stood at the precipice of choice, facing a truth that sent shivers down his spine. Is worth truly defined by status, or is it rooted in resilience and the extraordinary potential that lies within each individual? The crowd simmered with tension, questioning the very nature of success as Jeremy teetered on the edge of a profound decision. Would he rise to champion a woman who represented everything he once was, or back away into the comfort of wealth and silence? The risk hung enticingly in the air, leaving all present on edge, waiting for his next move. Jeremy's mind raced as he weighed the agonizing choice before him. Maria's words flowed with a clarity that captivated the room against the murmurs of disbelief. He was struck by a vivid realization: she was not simply a part of his past, she represented the authentic version of success he once aspired to. While his peers basked in superficial accolades, Maria had dedicated herself to true achievement, dedicated to a pursuit of knowledge that illuminated her character. As he watched her illuminating presence shrink under the weight of judgment, the bitterness within him grew. These were not just casual acquaintances, they were the architects of his current reality, masters of the game he had chosen to play. Their expressions of disbelief abounded like arrows aimed at Maria, the embodiment of every struggle he wished to forget. In that moment, Jeremy felt a familiar impulse rise within him, one that pushed against a reality he had meticulously crafted around him. What if it were his moment to redefine success? What if he leveraged his platform not just for himself, but to uplift someone who deserved recognition beyond the roles assigned by class? The thought terrified him yet ignited a flicker of determination. He wanted to reclaim his narrative, to bring forth the unvarnished truth where privilege did not masquerade as merit, that he considered stepping away from the shadows of insecurity that had governed his past. The clock, it seemed, was running out. Those around him awaited the inevitable judgment he would render. The choice loomed over him like a grand chandelier, an emblem of both illumination and oppression. The murmurs of the guests hung heavily in the air, but Jeremy knew what he had to do. Summoning his confidence, he moved toward Maria, feeling the full weight of his decision rumble deep within. Each step brought clarity, a cascade of resolve washing over his doubts. He had fought so hard for success, yet it meant nothing if he didn't stand for what truly mattered. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" His voice rang out, cutting through the whispers like a knife. Every eye turned to him, confusion sprinkled with curiosity. A ripple of tension danced within the room, but Jeremy was undeterred. He felt the flicker of a long-forgotten fire sparking inside him. "I would like to introduce Maria," he continued, his tone unwavering. "Not just as the maid of my childhood, but as a brilliant mathematician whose research is transforming our understanding of complex algorithms. We had a brief conversation earlier, and it shook me to my core, reminded me of what true intelligence and dedication look like." Silence fell as disbelief morphed into stunned expressions. He could almost hear the gears within their minds clanking as they processed the redefinition of Maria before them. There was no going back. His heart raced, but his conviction remained unshakable. He opened the floodgates. Now he had to navigate the waves of destruction that could follow. With each passing second, the weight of his decision intensified. Would his peers scrutinize his newfound conviction? Would Maria be embraced, or would the walls come crashing down around them both? Could he withstand the backlash that might ensue from challenging the very foundations of their elitism? As Jeremy felt the rush of adrenaline flood his system, a jarring realization hit him. This was his moment, not just for Maria, but for himself. Here lay an opportunity to craft a legacy etched in authenticity rather than glitter. Would he face the backlash, or would he shy away once more into the safety of observe and remain? The tension thickened as the crowd held its breath, awaiting the reactions to his bold proclamation. And in that silence, Jeremy understood unequivocally, it wouldn't be the acclaim that validated him, but rather the courage to embrace the truth. Yet, an undeniable tempest brewed within him, reminding him of the cost that often accompanied such bravery. The evening held its breath as Jeremy prepared to face whatever storm lay ahead. Would he be able to shoulder the consequences of his actions, or would he falter beneath the weight of expectations? In this battle of resilience, it became clear, he was about to step into a fire that would burn away lies and strip him of the comfort he once embraced, and in that pivotal moment, as whispers congregated, eyes filled with judgment, and the atmosphere crackled with intensity, Jeremy braced himself for the most daunting challenge yet, not just redefining success, but in facing the true depth of who he had become. The path forward beckoned, yet uncertainty lingered heavily. Would he emerge stronger, or would his decision lead to an unraveling of the double life he had convolutedly woven? The silence that enveloped the room was unyielding, a testament to the weight of Jeremy's words. The sharp inhale of disbelief came from somewhere towards the back, and as the collective breath was held, Jeremy felt the gnawing sensation of vulnerability clawing at his confidence. He stood exposed, a raw nerve in front of acquaintances who had only ever known him under the cloak of privilege and charm. Maria's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and gratitude flickering across her features. But alongside it, he detected a much deeper emotion: fear. Perhaps she sensed the potential repercussions of his words, or maybe the implications of standing in the spotlight. Jeremy dropped his gaze momentarily to gather his thoughts as the heat of scrutiny bore down on him. This was not just about lifting Maria's profile, it was a careful dissection of his own identity, a plunge into the essence of who he truly was beneath the layers of societal approval. His inclination to retreat momentarily resurfaced, the specter of his old self whispering seductive reassurances of safety and conformity. Yet in that moment, he heard Maria's voice echoing from earlier, reminding him of what steadfastness looked like. It drew him back to his feet with a force he had not anticipated, an undeniable urge to push forward, to re-establish his connection to authenticity. "Why does it matter?" someone finally blurted out, breaking the stillness like a stone thrown into clear water. "She's just a maid." The words ricocheted around the room, igniting an uproar of half-hearted laughter and critical glances. Jeremy's heart plummeted. This reaction was precisely what he feared, proof that social hierarchies thrived in this bubble of elitism, rejecting any challenge to their status quo. Suddenly, his thoughts crystallized into an actionable plan, igniting a fire within him that had long lain dormant. He would not only defend Maria but stand against the very ideologies that conferred worth based on wealth and class. He scanned the room, locking eyes with one or two friendly faces, familiar yet forsaken in their ignorance. If he was going to venture forth, he needed allies, people who might echo his sentiments rather than denounce them. Success shouldn't be categorized by the label on one's job, he declared, voice steadying as he embraced a newfound fervor. It should be measured by the impact of one's work. His declaration spun the room into a new cyclone of murmurs. Conversations mixed and clashed, the atmosphere evolving into an emotional battleground. The more Jeremy spoke, the more he felt his own transformation, confidence suffusing his words, stripping away remnants of self-doubt. That he looked at Maria, urging her silently to trust his resolve. The glint in her eyes spoke of hope, resilience, and maybe even recognition of a shared battle. The warmth of their shared journey, the struggles they had both faced, an inexplicable partnership born out of adversity, surfaced in his heart. He stepped off the stage of pretentiousness and onto the ground where truth flourished, each interaction creating ripples of potential change. With renewed determination, he rallied the courage to address the incredulous crowd again, raising a hand that trembled from adrenaline but exuded a sense of purpose. "Let us redefine what it means to support each other. We have a chance to acknowledge talent where it exists, regardless of where it comes from. Maria deserves to be celebrated, not shunned. Are we willing to stand behind our principles, or are we content living in the shadows of privilege?" The silence that followed felt different, charged, electric, intentional. As Jeremy braced for the tidal wave of reactions, he questioned within himself what lay on the other side of this defining moment. Would he find allies who shared his vision, or was he standing on the precipice of alienation? In the charged silence, the cacophony of reactions began to unravel. Faces around him twisted in contemplation, some lighting with intrigue while others hardened with resistance. As the first voice broke through the tumult, accusing and incredulous, Jeremy could feel the intense shift surfacing beneath the surface. This could either launch him into the unknown, further than he had ever dared to venture, or anchor him in the very battles he meant to fight against. The moment hung heavy in the air, and in a flash of realization, he understood. He was on the verge of confronting the most significant challenge of his life, not against them, but within himself. The question now was whether he could face the consequences of his own awakening, or if he would retreat once again into the comfort of compliance. As the crowd buzzed with escalating discussions, Jeremy sensed a storm brewing. There would be fallout, there always was. But amid this whirlwind, he found clarity. He needed to forge ahead and embrace whatever came next. Whatever transformed in that space could alter the course of his very life, the legacy of truth reverberating through the lives he touched. And as a familiar anxious anticipation filled his chest, he prepared for the response, knowing one thing for certain: this was just the beginning of a much larger fight for authenticity, a fight that would test the very boundaries of his identity. What awaited him next could shatter or solidify the path he was determined to carve out anew. The murmurs that flooded the room crashed against Jeremy like waves, each voice a reminder of the storm he had unleashed. Most of the crowd was dismayed, but others seemed intrigued, a spark ignited in some faces, perhaps an awakening, or a flicker of curiosity about what lay beneath his audacious challenge. He felt the weight of eyes on him, probing, searching for weakness or affirmation. This was the crucible where he would be tested. In the throes of that restless atmosphere, Jeremy grappled with the impulse to step back, to rejoin the ranks of complacency that he had inhabited for so long. The familiar twinge of doubt crawled back, telling him that the tight-knit fabric of his world could be torn apart. But then a flash of resolve struck him. This was not just for him but for those silenced by bias and prejudice. He sensed Maria's presence, a quiet strength beside him, a reminder of the struggles they both faced, conjoined by the burdens of their respective places in society. With clenched fists, he turned toward her, finding confidence in her unwavering gaze. The moment was pregnant with possibility, yet filled with tension that hung between them, a silent pact forged in shared purpose. "Tell us more," someone finally shouted amid the clamor. It was a challenge, and the crowd leaned in, their curiosity baited. This was the moment Jeremy had hoped for, an opening to expose the truths they all skirted around in their bubble of privilege. "People like Maria are not just labels we assign," he pressed on, feeling the adrenaline zip through him. "They are hardworking individuals with dreams, skills, and potential. We need to confront our biases and question why we elevate success based on wealth rather than merit." Each proclamation caused ripples, some resonating with a few who seemed to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Jeremy could feel the tide changing gently, yet gusts of resistance flared up as well, emanating from those unwilling to challenge the status quo. As adversarial laughter erupted from a corner of the room, Jeremy was met with the glares of entrenched elitism. "You're just a product of privilege, Jeremy." A voice rang out, sharp and derisive, an effort to cut him down. And there it was, the direct confrontation he had been dreading yet simultaneously inviting. It sparked an internal tempest as he mentally steeled himself against the onslaught of cynicism and scorn. Would he falter under the weight of their comments, or would he stand firm? "I am," he acknowledged, his voice gaining strength despite the chaos. "But recognizing my privilege doesn't mean I should ignore the truths around me. It means I have a responsibility to change the narrative, to lend my voice to those who have been silenced." He could feel eyes shifting, the energy around him polarized. Some may have been captivated by his passion, while others clenched onto their disdain, unwilling to acknowledge their privileges. The emotional friction was palpable, and he was caught in the middle, holding tightly to a thread that could either unite or fracture. He breathed deeply, allowing the charged atmosphere to seep into him. "If we are to truly build a just society, we can't turn a blind eye. We must elevate all voices, irrespective of their backgrounds, and that begins with all of us right here." With each word, Jeremy felt himself further evolve. He was no longer just a passerby in the world of inherited wealth, he was now actively questioning, forming alliances, and rooted in authenticity. The hesitant individuals who had once offered him lukewarm support now appeared to ponder his words carefully, perhaps for the first time acknowledging the power they wielded. The challenge remained, not just to convince but to redefine the relationships between himself and those still trapped in narrow views. As the cacophony began to simmer, a sense of reckoning washed over him, grounding him in purpose. Jeremy understood he was entering uncharted territory, stepping boldly into the role of advocate, yet grappling with the realization that this leap carried incredible risk. The definitions of himself would be rewritten through this engagement, and he could not retreat, but behind the glimmers of hope, he sensed twinges of hostility forming around the edges. Would he face a backlash strong enough to sever the connections he had? As they lingered in the liminality of silence and anticipation, Jeremy knew he had to prepare for what would follow, a reaction that could amplify his revolution for equality or threaten to engulf him in isolation. What awaited him was still veiled in uncertainty, but as he steadied his resolve, he relished the vision finally forming before him, a movement blossoming through truth in the very heart of confrontation. Would his commitment to championing the cause withstand the impending fallout, or would he find himself alone against a wall of resistance? The tension in the room thickened, coiling around Jeremy like a serpent poised to strike. Silence followed his declaration, a hush that danced between fear and curiosity, leaving the air crackling with unspoken thoughts. The audience had shifted, some wrapped in attention, others wrapped in a web of defensiveness. Maria's gaze strengthened his resolve, yet he could feel the palpable weight of judgment draping over him. Voices began to whisper again, doubts threading through the crowd, questions about his motives, about what drove a privileged individual to confront the very fabric of his own world. They were vital questions, and Jeremy welcomed them. What did they know of his struggle? Of the sleepless nights spent dissecting his privilege, grappling with guilt, and wrestling with the fear of losing everything? Each critical thought was like a dagger aimed at his heart, sharp and unnerving. What do you even know about struggle, Jeremy? Another voice broke through, laced with contempt. You think you can just swoop in and save the marginalized? Uncertainty flickered in Jeremy's chest, a faint echo of the self-doubt he had fought so hard to suppress. He was no savior, he was simply a person who had begun to see through the fog of his upbringing. Yet the challenge ignited a fire within him, one that fueled a much deeper need to articulate his own journey, a personal awakening he had never fully confronted. In that moment, something shifted in him, a burgeoning defense mounted not against the accusations but against his hesitance to fully understand himself. You're right, he replied, lifting his chin defiantly. I can't begin to claim the struggles others face. But I can start by listening. I can advocate, and I can learn. His heart raced with the revelation, unleashing a wave of clarity. He needed to delve deeper, not just into the lives of others but into his own. How had his upbringing formed his values? What fears did he still cling to? As he spoke, he felt layers of his identity shed away, no longer just a product of privilege but a vibrant amalgamation of experience and insight. This isn't about me saving anyone. It's about recognizing that we are all a part of this reality, intertwined with the struggles that exist around us, regardless of our starting points. The crowd stirred, some were nodding, perhaps reassessing their perspectives in the light of his newfound authenticity. Yet, the hostility simmered beneath the surface. Jeremy knew he would have to keep pushing through their defensiveness, but how far could he go? He turned to Maria, hoping the connection between them could serve as a bridge to understanding. What do you believe we can create together? He asked, his voice steady yet soft. The simplicity of his question seemed to quiet the air even more. She regarded him with a mixture of surprise and warmth. We can create spaces for dialogue that foster transparency and compassion, she suggested. Each word dripped with intention, exposing the potential their combined voices held. But it's essential that you remain vigilant. Even among allies, not everyone will welcome the truth. Jeremy felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Did he truly understand the depths of that statement? He was entering a vast territory where trust could easily fracture. Where would this take him? As the murmurs faded into thoughtful silence, he sensed the impending challenge blossoming before him. The commitment to growth was no simple feat, and resistance loomed like a shadow at the edge of dawn, ready to eclipse the light he was trying to nurture. That he needed to clarify his intentions, yet the unpredictability of receiving a backlash weighed heavily. Each affirmed alliance could dissipate into a sea of opposition that would ring in his ears, a reminder of the fragility of trust. How would he navigate this journey? How would he engage minds hardened by prejudice, with an empathetic ear while maintaining his newfound determination? The next step loomed ahead, thick with uncertainty. An unfamiliar determination surged within him. He sensed that his transformation was just beginning, the initial ripples of change paving the way for a much deeper journey through the waters of advocacy, and just as those thoughts sparked a fresh sense of purpose, an unexpected figure pushed through the gathered crowd, a person from his past, someone who could unravel everything he had built. Would their reappearance threaten his commitment, or provide the key to unlock deeper understanding? Jeremy's heart raced as he turned to face the figure stepping forward. It was Rachel, an old friend from his past, her presence both a jolt of nostalgia and a whisper of unresolved tension. The last time he had seen her, they were young, carefree, and oblivious to the complicated web of privilege that would define their paths. Rachel, he breathed, his voice barely audible against the distant murmur of the crowd. The warmth in her smile faded slightly, an inscrutable look settling on her features as she squared her shoulders. What are you doing here? She asked, genuine curiosity mingling with skepticism. Taking a deep breath, Jeremy felt the weight of their shared history pressing down on him. He could recall moments spent together in the past, the carefree laughter and conversations that ventured into deep waters about their dreams and the world beyond their affluent bubble. But back then, those discussions had felt so distant from the harsh realities he was now trying to confront. "I'm here to learn," he replied, searching her eyes for understanding. "I'm trying to grapple with both my privilege and the responsibility that comes with it." Rachel raised an eyebrow, a spark of incredulity igniting in her gaze. "Really? Since when do you care about social responsibility? You've always been about your family's legacy, your comfort." Her words stung more than he expected, reverberating through the facade he had tried so hard to flip. Was he just a naive idealist, trying to recreate the image of himself he had constructed over the years? This was not about an image, he wanted change, to understand, to advocate. "Things are different now," he insisted, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. "I can't ignore the fact that others suffer while we were coddled in our world. I have to do something." "Do something?" She scoffed. "What big plans do you have, Jeremy? You think your little speeches and empty rhetoric will make a difference?" To hear disdain register in Rachel's voice pushed him beyond defensiveness, toward a critical examination of his intentions. Had he been speaking too much, too soon? Was he wearing his own transformation like a badge, rather than living it? He thought of Maria, her call for vigilance echoing in his mind. "Believe me," he said, lowering his voice to keep the moment intimate. "This is just the beginning of my journey. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to listen. I want to make space for others to share their stories." She softened for a moment, and he sensed a flicker of understanding. But the hesitation lurking in her features hinted at deeper concerns. Were they also echoes of his own doubts? As if sensing his internal tumult, Rachel pressed on. "You know better than anyone that not everyone wants to hear those stories. Some people will actively resist. Are you ready for that fight?" The raw honesty behind her question struck a chord within him. It wasn't just resistance from the outside world that he needed to grapple with, it was the resistance within himself, the part of him that still feared judgment, that sought validation above all else. "I thought I was," he replied, grappling for his conviction. "But now I see it's more complex than I realized. It's about more than just stepping up, it's about embracing discomfort and facing the backlash and the discomfort head-on." Their gazes locked, and a silent understanding ebbed between them, but as quickly as it appeared, uncertainty crept back in. Just then, a clamor erupted in the room, a murmur of discontent from the audience spiraling into urgency. This scrutiny wasn't just pointed at Jeremy anymore, it could soon engulf Rachel too. "Are you with me or against me?" he asked, staking a claim in the growing chaos. Before she could answer, the murmurs crescendoed into louder disagreements, revealing a divide among the audience. Jeremy knew that this defining moment, a choice between supporting or retreating, would not only reshape his next actions but also express the core of his resolve, and as Jeremy glanced between the crowd's shifting dynamics, he caught sight of the wary eyes of other attendees, mirroring a multitude of reactions: concern, curiosity, skepticism. Would Rachel's presence fuel his mission, or would it draw shadows of doubt from the shadows of their past? The answer lay ahead, cloaked in uncertainty, ready to unravel his fledgling empowerment. The next chapter of his journey was at hand, and with it, the realization that perhaps understanding and acceptance would require confronting more than just external barriers. It would call upon him to confront the very truths he had long avoided. The tension in the room thickened as the audience's murmurs morphed into audible arguments, creating a cacophony of dissension. Jeremy felt his pulse quicken, a potent mix of fear and adrenaline coursing through him. This was it, the moment where his ideals would face reality. The stakes were higher than he had anticipated, and he couldn't afford to back down now. Rachel's brow furrowed, caught between the pulling gravity of their shared past and the pressing urgency of the present. For a fleeting moment, Jeremy noticed her hesitation, an internal debate unfolding within her. Did she believe he was capable of leading this charge, or had he simply become a caricature of his own ambitions? The line separating doubt from resolve seemed to blur. He scanned the audience again, searching for a sense of connection, for anyone who might align with the less comfortable truths he aimed to voice. Yet, most faces reflected cynicism. Would they ridicule him for wanting to be an ally rather than an oppressor? The thought churned in his stomach. Fumbling with his own internal judgment, he felt a flicker of determination surge within him. If he couldn't convince either her or the crowd, all this would have been for naught. "Look," he started, his voice attempting to project a calm he didn't fully feel. "I know I may seem presumptuous, coming from where I do, but that's exactly why I have to speak up." He took a calculated step forward, his gaze sweeping around the room. "We're living in an age where privilege and ignorance can't coexist without consequences. Each of us holds a piece of the puzzle, we cannot afford to remain silent or inactive anymore." Rachel crossed her arms but stepped closer, as though he had piqued her interest. The crowd quieted momentarily, the intensity of his words cutting through their arguments. But doubt still sprang in the air, thick enough to taste. He never felt such a swell of energy, both intoxicating and suffocating. "Jeremy, you can rally all the inner strength you want, but change doesn't come easy." Rachel's voice sliced through his monologue like a cold breeze. "You'll encounter haters, naysayers, your intentions might not matter to them. What are you really prepared to sacrifice?" Her challenge ignited a fire inside him. "I'm prepared to lose what isn't real," he stammered, grappling with his convictions. "To face judgment, to face down my own fears. But isn't that what truly matters? If our comforts mean turning a blind eye to suffering, then why should I cling to them?" The audience began to shift again, murmurs sparking like flint in the darkness, igniting discussions. Jeremy's heart raced. He needed to hold this fragile attention, to bridge the distance between them and ignite a desire for their involvement in the narrative he was trying to craft. He thought of Maria, her belief that vulnerability could foster resilience, and how he needed to embody that principle. "I can't stand by any longer, watching as others suffer while I live in ease. I want to leverage my privilege for change, but I need allies. We must talk about what we've previously ignored, what we've been conditioned to overlook." A serenity enveloped the room for a brief moment, as he felt the crowd's collective breath. In that suspension between hope and hesitation, he saw eyes widen, meetings of glances across the noise patterning the room. Perhaps transformation was possible, even among a group so steeped in comfort. Rachel's look softened, and for a moment, she nodded as if conceding. He could sense her internal struggle recreating familiar pathways of doubt rounded with curiosity. "Okay," she replied, finally dropping her arms. "Let us hear what you have to say. But be ready to face the truth of your assertions, Jeremy, both from others and from yourself." Their agreement hung palpably in the air, the beginning of a tenuous alliance. But he sensed an underlying tension. The real challenge lay ahead. The room had quieted, but he could feel the potential for backlash simmering just beneath the surface. Just when Jeremy began to feel a flicker of hope, an unexpected interruption shattered the fragile alliance they had begun to form. A voice cut through the heavy silence, filled with authority and aggression. "What makes you think anyone here wants to listen to a millionaire preach about empathy and change?" The words resonated like a bomb dropped into still waters, propelling Jeremy into a new wave of scrutiny. Ahead of him lay a confrontation that might test the very foundations of his newfound resolve. Would he rise to defend his beliefs, or would the external challenge echo his own internal conflict? The moment hung heavily upon his shoulders, a reckoning was near, and he braced himself for the tumult ahead. The words hung there, sharp and unforgiving, aching for a response. Jeremy's mind raced as he felt the heat of the room intensify, the atmosphere thick with palpable tension. Who was this challenger? Did they represent the skepticism of the entire audience or the voices within him that begged for validation of his fears? For a brief second, he considered retreating into the familiar safety of his privilege. A part of him urged that doing so would protect him from vulnerability, from the dangers of exposing himself to mockery. But that spark, the one ignited by Rachel's challenge moments before, refused to be extinguished. "Why should you listen?" he echoed back, leaning into that discomfort. Because we're all working under illusions that make our lives easier while others pay the price. Isn't that worth discussing? Isn't it time we confronted the stark realities that bind us all, despite where we sit? The heckler's posture shifted, their rigid defense wavering at his audacity. It was a small victory, but it kindled something deeper within Jeremy. Could he master the art of dialogue instead of retreat? Rachel stepped in then, her voice authoritative. If we can at least start with honesty, perhaps we can unravel the tight hold of skepticism that many feel. Jeremy felt renewed strength in their alliance, their shared determination breathing life into the stark air. He saw her resolve, that flicker of hope, and it mirrored his own. You claim to want to change the world, the challenger sneered, but what have you truly sacrificed? What risk have you taken? Each pointed question was like a punch to the gut, forcing Jeremy to reevaluate the foundation of his convictions. Yes, he spoke of leveraging privilege, but had he fully embraced the discomfort that came with it? Had he explored his own depths or brushed aside those dark corners to keep his vision polished and palatable? With unexpected clarity, he recognized the echoes of Maria's teachings within him once more. Perhaps I haven't faced that truth fully, he began, his vulnerability surface level yet invigorating. But I want to. I'm here today willing to learn. If you feel my words are empty, then let us engage. Test me if you must, but know that I am ready to confront the challenges that come. From the fringes of the room, small murmurs began to develop into an audible groundswell. The tension, once suffocating, started to shift into something else, curiosity layered with criticism. He realized the opportunity emerging. This could mark a pivotal moment, not just for him but also for those around him. Engagement, not perfection, he thought. It became his mantra, an anchor to guide him through the tumult. Was that not what leadership required? Could he endure discomfort to drive meaning into the lives of others? Rachel's eyes captured his, filled with a mixture of admiration and fear. They both knew that candidness could lead to unforeseen vulnerabilities and might expose inherent weaknesses. He could see the questions etched on her face. Would they withstand the storm of this confrontation? As he pushed against the tide of scrutiny, Jeremy felt anticipation build. This was more profound than any speech he could have prepared. Here, amid the challenges clowning his intent, lay an opportunity for true connection, one built from honesty and vulnerability. He was not just speaking to defend his beliefs, he was on the precipice of reshaping them entirely. He focused again on the challenger, finding resolve in their shared humanity. Let us not be adversaries. Help me understand how I can reconcile the privilege I hold with the pain I wish to alleviate. The challenger's eyebrows rose at his earnestness, shifting the dynamic for the audience. Jeremy noted the change, the flickers of interest surfacing amidst earlier skepticism. But just as he began to feel the tide turn, another voice intruded, cutting through the fragile atmosphere yet again. Your understanding means nothing without action, millionaire. Until we see you in the trenches, it's just words. At that moment, Jeremy felt a resounding truth: conviction without action was hollow. This was the pivotal revelation he needed. Would he act on it? Feeling the weight of responsibility pressing against him, he realized the challenge had transformed into a doorway. The real work was just beginning, but he couldn't ignore the expectation now looming before him. Determined to confront this new moral crossroads, Jeremy took a deep breath. I'm ready. Not just to speak, but to engage. What comes next isn't just my journey, it's ours. Let us explore what our actions will reveal. And with that, he glanced around the room, ready to take the next step into unfamiliar territory, ready to wrestle with the truths that lay ahead. What consequences awaited him as he committed to change, and how would he navigate the fallout of this burgeoning alliance? The room buzzed with a new energy as Jeremy's declaration hung in the air. The words, driven by urgency and a hint of fear, surged through his consciousness. Every eye was now locked onto him, and for the first time since stepping into this space, he could feel the weight of expectation draped across his shoulders. The shift was undeniable not only in the audience but within Jeremy himself, who stood teetering at the edge of self-discovery, faced with the challenge from the voices echoing in the back of his mind, he understood that understanding was only the first step, action was the true test. What had he sacrificed, truly? He had enjoyed the privileges of a comfortable life, largely unaffected by the turmoil that raged outside his carefully curated bubble. But those days of passive observation were over. Now, he needed to dive into the depths of discomfort that awaited him. Trenches, then, he muttered to himself, feeling a shiver of resolve creep through him. This concept of the trenches solidified into a tangible goal as he recognized the implications. It was time to take risks, to step outside of the theoretical and immerse himself in the gritty reality he had long spoken about but never truly experienced. "Let's start local," Jeremy proposed, feeling invigorated. "This city has countless issues we could tackle together, and I can begin right here. I want to see the neighborhoods that face challenges day in and day out." His voice steadied, echoing with sincerity. A low ripple of intrigue stirred among the crowd. It was a response, albeit cautious. Some seemed to lean into the idea, while others remained skeptical, arms crossed defensively. Jeremy caught Rachel's eye, she appeared supportive yet apprehensive. "What will that mean for us? For your life?" she whispered, stepping closer to him. "I'm not sure yet," he confessed. "But to lead, I must adapt. Every word I've spoken needs grounding in accountability." Besides, he hesitated, scanning the room filled with faces of doubt and expectation. "It's a chance to discover more about myself, what I truly believe in." With determination surging within, he orchestrated a meeting that would invite community voices to share their narratives and needs. It didn't take long to realize the challenge of this initiative was far from superficial. Planning it made him acutely aware of the divisions and struggles entrenched in the very fabric of his city. He would need to navigate layers of bureaucracy, distrust, and his own fear of inadequacy. But as days morphed into weeks, Jeremy found himself burdened with questions that began to gnaw at his core. Each conversation unveiled deeper truths. People shared their lives, their pain, and their dreams, desiring change. Challenging encounters forced Jeremy to confront fragile aspects of his identity. He learned that his role entailed not just speaking but actively listening. The discomfort expanded with every story he encountered: the youth striving for education against overwhelming odds, families battling addiction on tight budgets, and the elderly enduring loneliness in silence. His privilege now felt like an anchor, weighing him down with accountability. The realization settled in: talking of change was no longer enough. If he spoke about privilege, he must embrace the liabilities that came with it. What had seemed a safe, glossy vision now presented itself as a murky path full of unexpected tangents and hurdles. One night, reflecting upon the countless conversations recorded in his notebooks, Jeremy confronted a growing tension within. What if they reject my help? What if they see my intentions as patronizing? The thought knotted in the pit of his stomach, an unsettling reminder that genuine connection demanded vulnerability beyond what he initially anticipated. That in a moment of clarity, he ultimately chose a simple but evocative imitation of the individuals he met: a handwritten letter, a plea not for acceptance but for understanding, revealing his journey and ongoing commitment. It was a fragile bridge, reaching out to the community while silently asking for their support, but as he prepared to send it, a fateful message interrupted his resolve. "You've been summoned," the text read ominously, directing him to a meeting with influential community leaders. Deeply skeptical of his intentions, what awaited him in that next meeting? Would he face yet another challenge that could threaten the foundation he was attempting to build, or would he find unexpected allies? As Jeremy stepped into the dimly lit conference room, a palpable tension loomed in the air. The stark contrast between the room's polished surface and the rough edges of the struggles he'd come to understand made his heart race. This was a gathering of community leaders he had spoken about, a group wary of his privilege and rhetoric. Yet, despite his nerves, he was determined to embrace this defining moment of confrontation. That he took a seat at the long table, scanning the faces of those gathered. Each one seemed poised between skepticism and curiosity, their body language reflecting the unease about his intentions. He could feel the collective breath held in anticipation. He was the interloper in their world. But for the first time, he was resolved not to slip back into his former passive persona. Thank you for meeting with me, he began, his voice steady, calling upon the confidence he had nurtured through weeks of community engagement. I know my presence here needs to mean something. I want to listen and learn, not to lead from a position of privilege, but to collaborate as a partner willing to embrace the hard truths you face daily. The leader at the head of the table, a stern woman named Clara, raised her brow but said nothing. Jeremy could hear the whispers behind him, each murmur a reminder of the challenge ahead. I want to take accountability for my previous ignorance and the systems that upheld my comfort at the expense of others, he continued, embracing the vulnerability he had cultivated through his recent journey. What can I do that is meaningful? How can I use my voice to advocate for change without overshadowing the voices that already exist in this conversation? For a moment, the room was silent, the thawing tension palpable as they weighed his sincerity. Clara leaned forward, arms crossed firmly, her piercing gaze penetrating through the softness of his words. Words have a way of losing meaning without action, Jeremy. It's easy to talk about privilege in the abstract, but the reality is harsh, and you need to show that you are willing to step beyond the ivory tower. I understand, and I plan to prove that through action, Jeremy declared, feeling the ground beneath him solidify as he embraced this challenge head-on. I'm working to create bridges of connection among our community, foster inclusive dialogue, and the most important, I want to learn directly from those who are affected. I want the feedback, the criticism, even the ridicule if it keeps the dialogue authentic. One by one, the community members began to relax slightly, the initial friction giving way to a pulse of curiosity. Clara's eyes narrowed, intrigued, but still unyielding. You have a lot of work ahead of you to earn that trust. We deal with lives and struggles here, Jeremy, not academic exercises. Can you manage the pressure? No, I can't manage it, he replied, a newfound bravado igniting within him. But I can endure it. I'm here to serve whatever the community decides is most meaningful. A ripple of cautious approval flickered across the table. Clara assessed him with a steely gaze before leaning back in her chair, slowly beginning to guide the conversation. As discussions emerged, Jeremy contributed his insights, interspersing his experiences, framing his journey not as a blueprint but as a willingness to grow as a participant. The hours rolled on, and as they discussed, Jeremy felt energy shifting in the room. Their concerns about his motives began to give way to a budding recognition of his genuine intentions. Time passed, and each conversation gradually began to unfold the tapestry of the community's collective voice. They spoke in depth about issues that had long affected them while he felt himself absorbing the stories and perspectives that defined their everyday lives. Jeremy left that meeting, heart racing, his mind lit with new insights and possibilities. He knew the path would be challenging, the backlash inevitable, yet he felt a sense of empowerment materialize within him. The recognition that he was ready to dismantle his comfort for the sake of those who had long suffered in silence propelled him into the next chapter of his transformation. Days bled into weeks, and proactive initiatives sprouted from the conversations that had taken place at that pivotal meeting. From workshops focusing on empathy to organizing community education events that invited diverse voices and experiences, Jeremy sparked a series of campaigns aimed at elevating local stories. The movement gained momentum, igniting passion and camaraderie as neighbors rallied side by side to shift perceptions in the community, much like candles illuminating the darkest corners of a once-lit room. Steve, a young local artist he had met during his outreach, offered to collaborate on an exhibition that captured the essence of resilience within their community. Together, they crafted narratives that bridged generations, showcasing struggles interwoven with triumph, adversity resonating with harmonious creativity. As the grand opening approached, Jeremy found himself standing before the newly launched establishment, a gallery embodying the spirit of what it meant to rise from challenges. He paused, gazing at the smiling faces of community members celebrating their collective achievements. Each moment reflected their intertwined journeys around resilience, a testament to solidarity echoing through every brushstroke on the walls. At the heart of it all was the unwavering connection he felt with Maria, who had inspired his journey from the very beginning. The celebration enabled him to recognize his growth, no longer bound by the fear of judgment or the paralysis of privilege. He had conquered not just the judgments of others, but the internal battles that had once held him captive. As the evening progressed and laughter filled the air, Jeremy embraced the gratifying realization: he had not merely evolved, he had embraced an authentic version of success, one grounded in accountability, empathy, and unwavering resolve. The praise and recognition that flooded in from his peers felt lighter than it ever had before, nothing compared to the clarity of purpose that he now understood. Jeremy stood solidified in his new competence, confident, harmonized with the purpose that connected them all. In this transformative experience, he had truly learned what it meant to use his privilege as a force for change, reshaping community dynamics through authentic connection, and most importantly, he was ready to continue diving deeper. The sun set behind him, casting a warm glow over the audience gathered for the night's festivities, illuminating the promise held within each moment. And in that brilliant light, there stood a testament of a journey not merely taken but evolved into a movement for inclusivity, empowerment, and concrete impact. Now, take this moment to reflect. What does authentic change look like for you? What steps can you take today to contribute to the discourse? It's time to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about Jeremy's transformation and the impact it could have. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and join the conversation of change. Don't wait even one more second. This is a moment to show your support.